When I was blessed to get ordained a priest, one of the parts of the ceremony that's so striking is when the deacons come in and they just lay prostrate before the altar in the sanctuary. And it happens once a year on Good Friday that the priests do that at the opening of the Good Friday ceremony. And that laying prostrate before the high altar, before the sacrifice of themselves as they unite themselves to Jesus, is really the key to the priesthood. And when you hear now in the book of Hebrews here, this beautiful contemplation of the priesthood, the high priesthood of Jesus Christ, it's good for us to reflect on the priesthood of Jesus Christ so that we know how we can insert ourselves and participate in and offer to Jesus, with Jesus, our lives, so for the holiness of ourselves and those who are around us. You see, the whole idea of priesthood is to be this bridge, this kind of standing in the gap between where we are and heaven. And so Jesus Christ is the one who, through the ladder of the cross, through the bridge of the cross, inserts himself into that gap so that there's possibilities for us to get to heaven. And when you look at it, the roots of the priesthood, especially under Moses, which we hear this Mosaic law priesthood, which would come through his brother Aaron. And so Aaron had this priesthood set up through his lineage. And, well, they didn't do too well. Two of his sons were in there. They were doing they're like lighting the candles before Mass. And you could never light the candle of intercession, like the votive candles. You couldn't light that before the candle of sacrifice was lit. So these two young priests, their first week out in the priesthood, you can imagine, they make this huge mistake. And you know what happens? They just get struck down and they die. But then they keep the liturgy going. And like, well, that's what happens. So whatever. It's one of those Old Testament stuff that you look at and you're like, wait, your son's just... Anyway, won't get into that. But the point is, we can't have intercession. We can't offer intercessory prayers. We can't intercede unless first there's a sacrifice. And it's in that order. We can't have Easter Sunday without the sacrifice of Good Friday. And none of us have any opportunity of going to heaven, of saving our souls or the souls of our beloved, unless first and foremost Jesus Christ set the wood of the cross between earth and heaven. And so what does that remind us or teach us of? That we can't hold back the greatest prayer that we have in our hearts, which is our sacrifices, the daily trauma that comes at us, to sometimes pull us away from our faith, to pull us away from our identity, to pull us away. That daily tension we feel, kind of the gravity that kind of pulls us down. That sacrifice is what Jesus Christ came to embrace, to take up with him. That's why it's kind of beautiful. The cross has these two kind of directions to it. One, which is the first, which is God comes down to us. He sacrifices himself, and then he gathers the rest. And that's why there's the vertical and then there's the horizontal. And so first and foremost, Jesus sacrifices himself. And in that, he wants you to unite your sacrifices. In fact, the Mass, it's so beautiful, right? That the sacrifices, you'll hear this right after I prepare the gifts. It's like, my sacrifice and yours. The Lord Jesus wants us to bring our sacrifices to him. And then after the sacrifice, the intercession. Because it's not us who intercede. It's not even the saints that intercede. It's Jesus Christ that does this. And the thing that's so interesting about this is that it says in Hebrews, it's like, he did the one sacrifice so that the Jewish priests do not have to offer sacrifices all the time in the temple. It was a bloody mess in there. Thousands and thousands of lambs and goats and all these different animals were being sacrificed. There was bloodbath everywhere. And Jesus says, no, I am that sacrifice now. And this is what was so mind-boggling. This is what made no sense why people like the high priest would rent his garment. Because he started to realize that it's no longer a priest offering some animal or something else for his own sins and for the sins of others. It was now he was the sacrifice. Jesus Christ himself is the sacrifice. It's no longer like, let's take other sacrifice. No, he is that sacrifice. And so it's in the divine person of Jesus Christ that we go to. That's where our hope is. That's the whole point of our life, is to entrust to him everything. Not anything else, but him is going to be the one in which is going to help us go to heaven and bring our family there. And since he's a divine person, he's outside of time. So it's as if we're all kind of in a New York subway, which isn't very nice. But anyway, in that's time and place. And Jesus Christ in his human nature obviously spent 33 years riding that subway of life with humanity. But he wasn't just a human being. He wasn't just had a human nature. He was a divine person. And so that divinity outside of time, at that moment in which he sacrificed on the cross, through his divine time, which means he can control and come into our time anytime he wants because he's outside of time, that great love that he showed on the cross continues through his divine person, through the love of the priest, through the love of the Mass, and obviously in the Eucharist. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that all of us who come to Mass, all of us who get to participate personally in receiving Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, we get to plug in to that divine person who comes down to be in the gap between us and heaven and take our sacrifices to heaven with him. So therefore, he intercedes with us, for us, and in us for all those prayers, intentions, and things that are going on in our lives. There's no greater prayer than the prayer through the person of Jesus Christ.